Hello, we are the Stop Wearing My Clothes podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Kayla. One podcast.
Who's this?
Sisters. And this time, one cousin.
Yes, so for this episode, we're kind of going to get right into it. We're doing a mental health episode, and September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, so we thought it would be really just important for us to really talk on this subject.
And talk about our experiences, because we both have experiences in mental health illness, as well as our cousin Sophia, and we just are really just open and have a conversation about it. But we did just want to put on kind of like a little warning before this as we kind of go into it, because if you're not in a good place with mental health, or you maybe just not in the headspace to listen to like a full hour of a mental health podcast episode, it's okay if you don't watch this one, if you want to skip to one of our more lighthearted ones, because if that's what you need right now. But we did just want to give that little warning. And we also wanted to give you what's it called?
Some information.
Yes.
If you are in need of any support. So if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Helpline, which is 1-800-662-4357.
Or there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. And they are open. They'll have crisis workers who are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's a little bit on the serious side. We like always, me and Amy, use humor in a lot, even in these serious ones. So don't worry, it won't just be all gloom and doom. But we just, it's an important subject, and it affects our lives, and it affects so many more. And I think we're just going to go right into it. We're so excited for you to meet our cousin Sophia. She's so beautiful and smart, and has some really great insights on the topic.
Here we go.
All right, Amy, I'm going to have you introduce our guest.
Hello, this is our beautiful cousin, Sophia. She's
Hello.
here to talk about mental health today with us. We're really excited.
Yeah, a.k.a. philanthropist, a.k.a. cool hip college student, a.k.a. who could pull off that shaved head look. And I am so obsessed with you.
The quarantine shave.
Yes. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. Let's see.
Because you're kind of cool. I want to be you when I grow up.
I am a college student, and I'm a senior, so last year of college. Woo.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
I know, it's crazy. I don't want to be an adult after this year, but
understandable.
Let's see. I grew up in a really small town, really tight-knit family. I think especially growing up with our extended family too, every summer we go to grandma's house and everything. And I think that's what really has defined me, is I'm a huge people person. Relationships are something that means so much to me, just because of how I grew up around how solid family was and how important family relationships were.
And look at you on a relationship podcast.
Yeah.
The most perfect guest. No, you're already made for this. You're a great, I'm focused on you right now.
I'm also a social work major. So that's no surprise when it comes to building relationships with people and caring deeply for people. My dad is also a social worker. And so I think that's what kind of pulled me that way. I never thought I would want to do some of the work that he does, because growing up seeing him kind of go through all, it's really hard work. But
yeah, because your mom is a teacher, and I remember you growing up wanting to be what your mom is, your whole life. So it's very interesting that you got into college shift and going between that kind of teacher social working. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. And I think that also, because I have such a solid relationship with my parents, it's not a surprise that like I started off college wanting to go in the education route and then realizing halfway through that it's like, oh, I love kids, absolutely love them, but I don't want to be in this box of like teacher. And the majority of the time I spent like hanging out with the kids and talk to them about their lives. And then I realized like, oh, we haven't done any of your work. And so I think that's was kind of like a cue for me of like, okay, I really like kids, but maybe in a different capacity, a different career to be around them and build
That's amazing.
relationships.
And then like social work, because you said you didn't want to be in a box. I don't know. We talk about it a lot on this podcast of how I'm going to have about 20 million careers just because I get bored.
Yeah.
I want to hop around. Is there more like versatility with social work where you could like do this for a couple years, but then if you want to go ahead and do this, and then you could always go back to that, or there's this, is it a lot more like that?
There's a lot of options. You can work in the mental health field. You can do case management, which is just working with individuals, helping them get support and resources. And that's more of like just being an advocate for people. You can work in like community engagement. So like organizing and working in the nonprofit field. So there's a ton of options. It's very versatile for sure.
Tell them about, I don't remember the exact names, so you'll have to help me, of like what you do in like downtown Portland. Like there's an organization that you're a part of that I'd love to hear more about.
So I did my internship with them. I think it was the summer of the pandemic, 2020. And they're called...
What's the name? Oh, sorry.
Because People Matter. And they do just an incredible thing. Well, they do incredible things overall, but my favorite is Night Strike, and that's on Thursdays. And we just go downtown Portland underneath the Burnside Bridge, and we just go and gather with folks and provide a lot of services for them. So there's, a meal, there's clothes, hygiene kits, kind of those like basic human rights and services. But then on top of that, we go kind of like the extra mile. So we do foot washing, we do nail painting, we do haircuts, kind of just promote more like human dignity for people. And ultimately, like, it's less about like this mentality of us versus them, kind of like I'm above you because I have more resources, I have a house. But there's this really cool like equality among people of like, no, we're just human beings. We're helping each other out. We're connecting. And oftentimes, like, I come away from each night, like, learning more from them than like me giving them services. And just like, I think there's just so much power in just like sitting down with someone, having a conversation and just connecting, breaking all of those barriers and stigmas around like someone who is houseless, someone who like has a lot of struggles. So, and I call it like, I'm not religious, but I call it my church every week.
No,
that's where
amazing.
My people are.
I know. Me and Amy,
really awesome.
we did an episode where like our different selves, and kind of our spiritual self is one of those. And myself, I'm also not religious, but I just being kind and giving out positivity in the world. I just feel like that is what I care about. And then I also feel like you get a lot back from it as well. So it's kind of a selfish one, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
It's what like feeds your soul. You found that, and that's really awesome.
I agree.
Sure.
Quick before we get into, because we're going to talk all about mental health, do you have to be in Portland to be able to support, I'm so sorry, one more time the name.
Because People Matter.
Because People Matter. Do you have to be in Portland to support, or are there ways?
Yeah.
How can we help?
There's a lot of options. You can donate online to our cause. So it's,
I'll put a link to everything. I'll do it in a post because I think that's really important, especially with what we're talking about, right? Like this episode. So I just want to let people know, like, I will be posting something. I'll have like a little link. Also, if you want to follow Sophia, I will also be I mean, if you want people to, is that okay if I put your Instagram? Hey, follow
Yeah,
Sophia?
no, totally.
Okay, cool. So just to follow her on her journey, and then like you'll see a lot of overlap with this organization. And if you feel compelled to help, I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just think
Thank
it's the
you.
coolest thing, Sophia. First question, because we did kind of dabble in kind of you see mental health and these different experiences, and also like you deciding what you want to be, what you're going to college for. You kind of deal with these mental illnesses, and I would like to first kind of solidify like what we'll talk to about it, because me and Amy haven't necessarily full on said this is our experience either, so we can kind of just have a conversation of what all of our different experiences are. But I would love to start with you of just what is your mental health experience as from when you were born today. We don't have to don't go day by day, that we don't have time for that, but you know what I mean.
21 years.
Yeah.
I definitely have had a lot of struggles with my mental health like my whole life. I just didn't realize up until probably college,
because it's not talked about.
I didn't have a name for it. I didn't wasn't in therapy yet, so I didn't quite understand like my emotions and like what caused me to just like feel this way. But definitely like as a little kid, having a lot of just like body stuff, like thinking that I was overweight when I was just like this perfectly healthy kid. And that's just like society and what we put on women to be these tiny little twigs. And then just having really big emotions and not knowing what to do with them, not having an outlet.
I feel like when you were a little kid, like it was like a thing, like Sophia the tornado. Like you a little bit. If you were happy about something, the entire world knew about it.
Yes, I have. And like my last therapist I told her, I was like, I think I have, I think it was borderline personality disorder. I was like, I think I have this because of like all of these things. And of course I looked it up online, which is always great to self-diagnose yourself online.
WebMD, what?
Yeah. But she said, it's actually, I've never thought that about you. What I think you are is, if I had to give you a diagnosis, is just a highly sensitive person. And it's not something that's in like the what is the mental health? It's DSM or something like that. Like the big.
I probably should know. I'm sorry, I don't.
No, it's like
I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
The big book that has all of the mental health diagnoses. But
I'm probably half of them, half the book.
Yeah. But that, I think when she said that, it kind of like everything clicked. I'm like, okay, so when I was a kid, like all of these big emotions that I had, it was just because I just felt some stuff so freaking deeply. Like it was just like so deep. I think as a kid, having all of these big emotions and not knowing what to do, and also like no fault of my parents at all, but like there's a lot coming out now, research about how to help kids who have big emotions, and like that knowledge and resources just weren't out there when I was a kid.
The generation of our parents didn't have the toolbox.
Yep.
Of everything we know now. And I think it is really cool. Like if and when we decide to have kids, or Amy, when you raise your kids, we have that toolbox. And I think that's always something to think about. It's easy to blame your parents, very, but if they were given the tools, what the fuck were they going to do? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They did the best they could with what they knew and what they had and what they learned through their life.
Yeah. And I think too, like I've had a lot of conversations with my mom afterwards, like after going through therapy and after like really understanding like who I am, like having those conversations of, when you do this, it's really hard. Or like when this happens, this is why I act this way. And just being able to understand myself a little bit more. And then that helped me have a better relationship with my parents too, because it's like when I blow up with big emotions, they're like, well, why the hell did you do that? But now being able to have a conversation and be like, no, this is actually what's going on in my body, what's going through my brain. Now that you understand it, like, try to help me. I know you're also human, and it's hard when, you know, your daughter's having a full panic attack. But just having that level of understanding, I think in college is a lot. And still like figuring it out too. Like it's not over. I'm like,
Totally.
diagnose myself. I'm all good now.
Sure. Did you?
But kind of just like knowing how to handle it makes such a big difference, and just being able to verbalize what it is versus just like experiencing your feelings, but then on top of that, panicking because you don't know what to do about it or you don't know what's happening.
And when you said kind of like self-diagnosis or what your therapist thinks you have, did you ever actually get diagnosed with anything, or is there just certain types of mental illnesses you just kind of struggle with? Or could you kind of explain to me a little bit of like what, you know, if you were to explain to somebody of kind of what kind of some of your mental health issues are, or I call them superpowers. I'll go more into that.
I love it.
But, what would you say?
Yeah. So I think definitely anxiety and depression. And for me, like my anxiety is just like a constant. Like sometimes it's just like this steady line. It's just kind of there. And like I feel it all the time, but it's not, you know, it's just kind of chilling. And then like things will happen, or like things will build up, or I don't do my self-care, things that I need to do for my mental health. And then it gets heightened and heightened. Or certain situations, you know? And so for me, I think anxiety is a big piece of what I struggle with. And then with depression, like there have been like periods or seasons of time where I've been like just sad every day and not known what to do with that, or just feeling just super low. And that is, you know, depression sucks. It's not fun to be in that. Just like the way I described it, like the lowest point I have ever been is like, it felt like I was just living in gray. Like I was living in this, like I didn't see the world in color. Like I just saw it in gray. And that's something that like, I think it comes back every once in a while. If my anxiety gets really bad, then my depression will get really bad. Or like periods of time. So I think that's kind of my diagnosis that I feel for sure.
I love your description of like the gray. I was diagnosed with depression about 3-ish years ago, and how I like to describe it, like it's fun to describe, but like almost like a heavy sand instead of blood. And so literally even just like getting up to do something, even moving your hand to pick up the remote, it's just like everything's heavy.
Yep. Takes that much work.
Yes, exactly. That's kind of how I like to describe it. I guess I'll just go into mine then, if that's cool with you. I set up this podcast in a spot in my life where I thought I figured it out. And, you know, that's always a good start. And, you know, I know what I was going to say on this episode and what I am and who, you know, what I feel. But since then, the past like couple months have been more of a learning and kind of figuring new stuff out for me. So I got on medication about 3 years ago when I was diagnosed for depression. And just in the last few months, I decided to stop taking it. I'm not encouraging people to stop taking any medication or to get, like, it's really between you and your doctor and what you feel like. But for me personally, I'm just in a big question mark area of figuring out. I started to see a therapist for the very first time in my whole life 6 months ago. I did like the BetterHelp thing, the cool trendy thing that influencers do. And I started it, and it started off like somewhat like, okay, maybe this is good. I'll get something out of it, you know? And I kind of told her my main issues where it's just always super high highs and very low lows. Like when I'm like feeling good, like, you know, I moved to LA, I get a thing, I start businesses. I've talked a little bit about this. If I'm doing this podcast like a year from now, like I will be astonished. But you know, just like when I'm so fucking on, and I feel like I could take on the world and I like accomplish so much and even like so little of a time. But then I can't describe it. I don't know when it's going to come, but I hit this wall and I'm down for the count. And everything, it almost like takes away everything that I did in that last few months, weeks, days. It really just depends because I just neglect all of it. I don't, and it just usually goes down with me. And so really describing this, it was kind of interesting to my therapist. I was like, you know, like, even like I told her, I was like, even getting married, it was almost everything in my life leading up to now. Any big decision I made, moving to LA, getting married, doing this with my life, that has been a desperate me grabbing on to something. It's like, maybe this will make me stop being depressed. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will do it. And I just, you know, about 3 years ago, I realized when I was living in downtown LA at my dream school, on the day-to-day doing the most amazing things, and I was in like one of the deepest spots I've ever been. I'm like, so maybe it looks like it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like, you know, it's not this next thing that's going to make me happy. I need to figure that out within. I'm not going to find it outside of it. And I actually kind of told her, I was like, you know, and I moved to LA because I did this. I married Marcus, which it worked out great. And we're so happy. And he ended up being the love of my life. So it worked out. But I make these big decisions and it's like I'm on a leash for my mental health and I just follow it where it goes because I'm like that desperate to find something. And she's like, okay, so let me get this straight. You married the love of your life, you know, moved to LA like you've always wanted, started this, and this. So what's the problem? And it turned out to be like all of these like positive things. But, and so like, that's why I kind of call it like my superpowers. Like this depression is like what drives me to get shit done, you know? And so, yeah, when the low lows suck, they suck. But it's been a couple months since I've had the low lows. I decided to get off my medication and I actually gained like 40 pounds while I've been on it in the past 3 years. Am I talking way too much? No. Okay. I can't tell if you guys are bored or not. It's just, I'm all over the place a little bit with this because this is not what I was planning to say on this episode, but I am in a question mark area because another kind of bomb was dropped when I was kind of what you said when the therapist said, you know, I can't diagnose you because there's, at least my therapist I had, she's not like someone who can physically, or not physically, medically, I don't know. She doesn't have,
she's a counselor instead of like a psychiatrist.
Yeah, so she can't diagnose me. But what she did say that I should go get checked out, and I haven't. And after doing research afterwards, her telling me this. I guess a lot of people get misdiagnosed with depression, and she thinks that I have bipolar 2. So it really explains a lot of the high highs, low lows. It's like truly like I'm 2 different people. Yeah. And so that's a partial reason I stopped doing my medication. And then I also realized, again, I'm not encouraging anyone to get off their medication. I want to make that very, very, very clear. For me personally, so far in my very limited a couple months experience being off of it, I have not hit that wall yet, which thank the God, knock on wood, I'm not going to do it because of the audio. And then what I was going to say, I feel like the past 3 years on that, there was a part of me that was being suppressed by it. And I feel more myself than I have in a very long time. So I am in a huge question mark. That's kind of where I'm at now. And, you know, bipolar is a scary word because it sucks because, you know, like I think on like the CW is like the new 90210, someone's bipolar and they like burn the high school down. Like they're crazy, you know, crazy. So it's a scary word. And until you go and do your own research and realize, you know, probably how many people do suffer with this and like, either get misdiagnosed or just don't get help at all. So like I have not officially diagnosed, but I think I agree with my therapist, and I'm just taking time right now to figure myself out, and maybe not the best practices for everyone else or even just in general, but I am in a figuring this shit out situation at the moment.
Good for you.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I also feel that like that happens a lot with people with getting misdiagnosed. The whole diagnosis part is like super scary, and it can also be really hard, like depending on if you go to like a general doctor or like a psychiatrist or whoever, like you may get like 3 different diagnoses. So it's like, it's hard.
I also find it hard because it's all that they can go off is what you're telling them. And what you're telling them is very dependent on your mindset on that day. So go ahead, Amy.
I think it's also really important to be an advocate for yourself with your mental health, because I think, and I'm not downing on doctors at all, but sometimes you go in and you take the little test that they have you take, and it's like, okay, you have depression or you have anxiety because you feel these things, and so we're going to give you the general medication that we give everybody, and you're going to move forward that way. And sometimes that's wonderful for people because they need that quick fix, and it works for them. But sometimes it kind of puts you into a box and you're not going to seek further help when you need it. Or you are too embarrassed to say maybe what you think you might be experiencing more than just what's written on the paper. So I think it's really important for people that are experiencing these things to seek out the different types of help, like seeing a counselor, seeing a psychiatrist, and seeing your general doctor, and kind of all working together, because really having a team behind you can really help you figure it out, and talking to your family and talking to your friends so that you can really hear other people's stories, hear how they handle it, because a lot of things with mental health I feel like can really be trial and error, because some medications don't work for people and they just need a different brand, or they need a different amount or whatever, or some people really need talk therapy, because without that, they're, even with medication, they're not going to be able to handle those emotions that they're having. So I think being an advocate for yourself is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And I also think finding the right therapist. I have not found that yet. I actually stopped doing therapy, but not forever. I'm just taking a second because I just realized that person's not for me. So just because that first try didn't work out and you're like, oh, just therapy's not for me, making sure that you could switch counselors, find different people, different specialists, people, certain therapists have different specialties, and just making sure you don't give up on it just because that one therapist wasn't a good match too.
It's like
That's
online dating.
Totally.
Yeah.
Amy, do you want to go into your experience a little bit?
First, I wanted to say something because last night I watched, what is it called? The new short little documentary on Caitlyn Jenner.
Oh, okay. It's on Netflix. I haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, just something you said made me think of that. You said that your mental health is like your superpower and it drives you to do things and like go further than you ever would on certain things. Well, Caitlyn Jenner, when she was Bruce, or however you're supposed to word that correctly,
but
I think as Bruce, because Bruce had this identity dysphoria, it drove him to become an Olympic gold medalist, like put that drive, because that was the goal. If he could be an Olympic gold medalist, then he could fight this identity situation away. And so, I mean, once that happened, that's what drove him to do that. And so that's really cool, even though, I mean, a lot, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, a lot of people, successful people out there, I feel like most of them, have some mental illnesses, had a tough lots of things, like had a lot of hardships. And I feel like a lot of times that is like, it pushes you, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. And you just kind of have to find that balance.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll go into my story now. So I feel like, kind of like Sophia, I've always been a pretty highly emotional person. Not really knowing what to do with those emotions, and it would come out a lot of times in irritability or anger or those types of things. So I feel like I remember feeling like I was hard to deal with, and that kind of affects your mental health in itself, like feeling like you're a burden to people or that you're just like too much. And I always felt like I was too much. But I also like really didn't know what anxiety was when I was young. And so I would get this overwhelming, like panicky, restless feeling inside, but I didn't have a name for it. And so I would just like not know how to handle it, and it would just come out as a strong emotion of some sort. Um, so as I started getting older and it started to, I think I really noticed it when me and Jared started dating, because I would just like be annoyed at him, but I loved him so much. And I'm like, I don't want to feel this like super strong, irritable feeling all the time when I know he's not doing something wrong. Are boys annoying? Yes. You don't have anxiety if you think boys are annoying. That's not what I'm trying
Jared
to say.
specifically.
But it's just like there were ways that I should have been able to handle myself that I wasn't able to.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I feel like I just wanted to, I would get really depressed where I wouldn't want to leave my bed and I wouldn't be able to go to work. I just couldn't function. Like I just felt like everything was too hard. I had no motivation to do anything. But then I knew that there was really, like, it's almost like I should be happy. You know, why am I not happy? That's just like the way I should be feeling, but I just can't function. Um, so I've gone to a couple of different therapists, and I actually, one specifically, I did not have a good experience with. But then I started seeing a therapist that actually has seen a lot of people in my family, which I think was really helpful because I didn't necessarily have to give all of my backstory
Mm-hmm.
with my family and with a lot of the issues that we all experience. And so I felt very understood, which was really nice. And then from there, I went and saw a doctor, and I am on medication. I have been probably for like 3 years. And it's been a very positive thing for me. I have, it just takes the edge off of everything because I feel like when when my anxiety would get really bad, then my depression would get really bad. And then when I would kind of start getting out of my depression, then my anxiety would start, they just all play off of each other. And I
Yeah.
still experience that, but I'm actually able to, I'm more aware, which is great. I can like, notice when I'm starting to feel a certain way, so I'm able to communicate it better. And that has helped me, just knowing like what I am feeling. And maybe some days I am going to be depressed, and that sucks, but there is an end point. It will get better. I will be able to move forward, or I can at least handle it when before I could not.
Yeah, and it's so hard to know too, like when you're that low in life, like it feels like it's never going to end. And you can't ever know if it's going to get better until you're in that spot of like, oh, I am better, thinking back to that time that you were really low and knowing like that helps you with the next time you're low because you're like, I know I'm going to get better because of last time.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
You just have to keep pushing through, even though it's the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's way easier said than done.
Definitely.
And then Amy, you kind of touched on like dating and Jared and everything like that. Maybe that's a good transition into like how it's affect potential like our relationships, but like more of like dating relationships,
Mm-hmm.
like that sitch. Sophia, do you feel like it has affected like your dating life? Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you could say this or not. You're like single at the moment, right? Dating, like on the prowl. Watch out, boys.
On the prowl. Yeah, it definitely has affected my dating. I get so attached to people, especially people I'm dating, because I'm like, oh, this person really likes me and I have this security I also just like love so deeply and just have, I think you guys have talked about on your previous episodes. I've watched all of them, by the way. I'm obsessed. But those high expectations that we set, and just that like, and I don't know where this comes from because my parents are not like this, but like the fairy tale of like, you're going to find the love of your life in this perfect, beautiful marriage. And everything is rainbows and butterflies. And I think I go into every single relationship, whether it's the first date or like a couple of months in, and I am just like, I need to fall in love with this person. And in terms of like my mental health, I'm not gonna say I'm too like, I'm just real with people. Like I'm not too real because I don't want to imply that that's a bad thing, but like I'm just real. And so I do talk a lot about my mental health struggles with my partners, or like, you know, I'm going through it. I'm really depressed right now. And I think that that's really hard for, especially when you're in high school. Because I remember I was like dating this person, and I told them like a couple months in, like, I just like have anxiety all the time. And like, if you don't text me back, or like all of these little things that you do, and makes me super anxious. And like a week later, that person broke up with me. And so, and my sophomore year of college, I fell head over heels in love with a person. Like it was like we met and had like those conversations until like 1 or 2 in the morning in our dorm hall. And I was just like set. I was like, I have found my person. I found the love of my life. Like this is it. I am set. But that triggered my anxiety because I was like, I have to do everything perfect now not to lose this person, instead of like focusing on the like present and being like, you know, like it's gonna, you know, there's gonna be hard days. And I think I went in too fast and like brought on the heat and it really scared him. And I shared with him about my mental health, and you know, like how I have really low lows and am depressed sometimes, and like my anxiety is really bad. And I said, you know, I'm hesitant to even share this with you just because I have shared it with people in the past and they've broken up with me. And a week later, he broke up with me. And that was like, and he told me when he was breaking up with me that like this, I want you to know that like everything you shared with me about your mental health, this has nothing to do with the decision, blah, 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 blah. But of course, like in that moment, it's hard not to know, like not to just think that way of like, oh, of course you broke up with me because I told you that I am like mentally ill. And so
that you have a superpower.
That I have a superpower. Thank you. But I think that relationship, that last one, my sophomore year, was like, it set me into this, like probably the lowest piece of life that I've ever been in. And like, it got me to therapy because I was so low. Like I didn't eat for like 2 weeks. Like I would eat like little bits of food and that was it. But anything else just made me like sick. And so lost a ton of weight, like went through it completely, and finally got to therapy. And I realized through that relationship that like I liked my worth, and knowing that like I can't put my worth, I can't put my whole self into someone else, because that will like ultimately like destroy me. And it's like, you need to live your life for yourself. Like your partner is just part of that life. Like it's not like you are living life for this person and everything. So I think that in terms of dating, and it's still hard for me because like, I mean, I just went on a date a couple of days ago, and driving over, I was like, oh my God, what if this is the love of my life, blah, 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 and like have this like image in my head. And then it's just like, I get disappointed because it ended up like, it wasn't a bad date, but I just could tell like, this isn't my person. And so I think those high expectations I set for myself. And then when I do find someone that I really like, my anxiety is like, let's ruin it just a little bit and make you question everything. So that's what I'm ultimately working on for sure.
And I feel like a lot of people, just because of like the movies we watched growing up, romantic comedies, like the Disney Princess Prince, like the main focus of every woman character ever growing up was happily ever after man. Boom. The rest of your problems are over. And that's just so far from the truth. It's hilarious. And I'm going to be cognizant of that. If I have kids, like like, I don't know. I want to make sure I put, yes, there's some classics, and I'm not going to be some like, whatever. If moms decide to like make sure their kids doesn't watch Cinderella or something like that, I'm not going to be that far, but I do want to make sure they know it's a movie and that, I also have really strong female characters in front of them, whether it's a man or I have a boy or a girl or whatever in between.
Yeah, like, representation.
Exactly.
Well, and Disney movies specifically, and like other movies like that for children right now, they're really trying. They're really working on that. I feel like our kids are going to grow up a lot different than
I think so too. Thankfully,
kind of like the mindset that we were given. I love what you said, Sophia, about putting your all into someone, thinking that like that's your whole life, and then you lose that, and then you feel like you have nothing.
Yep.
And then through that, realizing that like that's not the way it should be. Like, you have to live your own life as your own person too. You have to find happiness within yourself and not rely on another person for that. Because I had a very, very, very similar, like, I feel like I was with you on that for sure, because I had the exact same situation with Jared. We dated, and I threw myself into it like we were going to get married tomorrow, and we were 19. And I just was like, this is it. This is my person. There's no way that we're ever going to break up, that we're ever going to anything. But then any sign of him pulling away or any sign of him not wanting exactly what I wanted, I would get such anxiety. And then I would be like, get mad at him, or I'd pick a fight or whatever it may be. And then in the end, there's a lot of things that happen too, but like in the end, that's why we broke up the first time, because I was just pushing so hard and I had this timeline. I would straight up tell him the timeline, like, we're going to do this and then we're going to have babies by this time, and I want this and I want this. Did I always say it was going to be with him? No, but like when you say that, it's kind of obvious that you're pushing the other person towards it. Yeah. And so I scared him for sure. And that was before I was open or even knew exactly what my anxiety was and how it manifested in my life. So I couldn't even really talk to him about it, because to me, it was just like, I just feel panicked. I want to be with you. I need to be with you. Like, panic all the time.
Yep.
And from there, when we did break up, I went into a very, very low place too. And I never had like, bulimia is when you throw up your food, right? Okay. I never had that. Like, I did it on purpose, but straight up, every time I ate, I would throw up. Like, I got so skinny. I remember being at Kayla's wedding, and someone said to me like, geez, you're really skinny. Are you smoking weed? Which I don't understand that, but someone said that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure if you smoke weed, you're going to be eating a lot. Or I don't know how
After
it works.
This, you're going to tell me who said that.
Okay, yeah. They were just like, wow, you're looking skinny. You've been smoking weed? I was like, number one, you should not. So actually, let's first say this. Do not comment on people's weight.
Absolutely.
Do not. One way or the other, it does not matter. Even sometimes with the like, oh, you're so skinny, you should eat a cheeseburger. Like, that's not nice. just because you're not calling me fat does not mean that is
I'm
nice.
not
Or
gonna
even
lie,
as a compliment too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And also, fat shouldn't be a word that is automatically something negative as well.
Yeah.
Like, embrace who you are, love it. We all need to accept all body types. Anyways.
I kind of miss people commenting how skinny I am, but that's just me. It's
You
different
got the
for
love
everybody.
curves now.
If I when I get really skinny, you guys can comment on it. I'm okay with it personally.
Okay.
Only if they give you permission.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, there you go. Well, anyways, so I had a really hard time. That's when I started seeing a therapist, and I went to my doctor, and I started experiencing that. So it's sometimes also at your lowest low that you're really able to create a change in your life. Are you always in the place to be able to do that? No, but sometimes it really can lead you to a better outcome of more awareness and happiness at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was kind of in a weird spot where I got married when I was 22. When I started dating my husband, I was 18. So way before kind of my mental health journey even. I mean, I've always had some, I don't, who knows what the diagnosis is, but I've been depressed since the longest I can remember, like childhood, elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always I just didn't grow up around talking about it, knowing what it was, knowing it was okay. And so I remember around 16, mom trying to force me to go to therapy, and legit, I was ready to take chains and connect them to my wrist to my bed so I couldn't get moved. I put my foot down and I won because I'm very stubborn and I get what I want. But it took me till I was 25 and being at probably the lowest low I've ever been, when I've always I had every single thing I wanted. I was living in LA, going to school for what I wanted, doing the coolest things, meeting the coolest people. I was married to legit the love of my life. And just what my depression does is it just, okay, then what's wrong? I have to identify something. And then that's what I choose is wrong. And that's what I have to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason at 25, my brain decided it was Marcus. That was what I needed to either fix, either break up with him, do something, my brain was attacking our relationship, us. And so much so that it was just really almost, we didn't make it through that. And that's when I went and I didn't start therapy, but I did I couldn't, first of all, I just want to tell people, because I was a 25-year-old married woman who, on her own in a different state. And I texted my mom. I was I physically cannot do this. Can you please set me up an appointment with a doctor? Because I need help. Because I physically couldn't do it. It was just, I don't know if that's common.
I've been at that spot in my life. I've called my mom and been like, Mom, I need you to do this for me because I'm so low, I can't do it. And she figured it out. That's what moms do.
Totally.
It's our moms.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it obviously was just, my brain chose to attack on Marcus, even though he's the most lovely person ever. But the hard thing is I tricked him into falling in love with me before he knew I was crazy. No, I say crazy. Maybe that's a trigger word for people. For me, it brings light to a very negative situation. So I like to call myself crazy, and that helps me for some reason. So sorry if that bothers anybody, but for me, that's how I make light of it. And I have to make light of things. But, and so he has zero experience with mental health. And so just figuring that, and I almost resented him for not automatically knowing what it was. I would say even when I got my medication, I'd say I was diagnosed with depression. This is what it is. I mean, we always had communication issues. So for even that, you just got married so young, it's a miracle we're still together. But so I would blame him for not knowing what to do to help me, or not fully understand it, not take it. Especially in that beginning, I felt he didn't take it seriously enough, and I felt a little dismissed by it. And it's not his fault.
Were you ever told to just calm down?
Yep, all the time as a kid.
Oh.
Stop crying. Calm down.
I actually don't have that same experience. I don't.
I guess you more depression though. Anxiety, I guess, is more of the calm down.
I wouldn't say that. normally I feel hints of anxiety, but I don't feel like enough where I need help for it. So that's not something personally that I've dealt with that much. But just like in like like him, just like me staying on the couch all day, like I don't think he understood. I thought he was just like, what is this woman I married? Like she's just like staying on the couch. You know, he loves me and he would never actually say that, but that's at least how I interpreted what he thought of me, versus it was just like, I physically can. I don't know how to describe this to you. So it's definitely hard when you start figuring yourself out after you're already with the person. It's a kind of a different, you know, you said like, you know, make sure you work on yourself before you find your person. Marcus was my everything. And it lasted for like 2-ish years without me. Like that's probably the longest stint I wasn't depressed in my whole life, was the first 2 years I was with Marcus. And then, you know, the newness kind of dies down and, you know, it just started slightly creeping back up. And so, you know, that's when I started chasing things. I was like, okay, what if we got a nicer apartment together, like when we moved in, then I'll be happy. Oh, okay, that didn't work. Okay, if Marcus like proposes to me, then I'll be happy. Even though like we got married and it's been great. And I say this to him, I say this on the podcast, like you probably should have waited. Like I don't recommend it. Like if someone came up to me telling me that they were going to get like got engaged at 21 and we're going to get married, I'm a total hypocrite. And I'd say, maybe you should wait. Even though it's just been hard, like figuring stuff out with him. It's not been the easiest. And maybe if I would have figured myself out and not just given my whole happiness just on him, you know, I mean, like I said, we're good now and it's like things are great, but you know, it's not maybe something I recommend. Like it worked. It's not going to work out for everybody. And so for me, I got literally the coolest kid in the world, like kid. He's a man. But yeah, it just could have worked out very differently for me.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said about like your mentality of like fixing those little things. And I think that that's a very westernized view of like mental health, of like, okay, or just in general, like, oh, something's wrong, let me fix it. And the podcast that really like completely changed my perspective on mental health was one of my social work classes. It's on NPR and it's called The Problem with the Solution. And it's about this like town, I think it's in Switzerland. And it's like this town where there are like folks who live there that are like a range from like who have schizophrenia to like, or may not even be struggling with their mental health. And in that area, and kind of just like their perspective on mental health is like, it just is. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing you need to fix about the individual. Like, maybe they are struggling with some really like hard emotions and you can help them work through that. But it's not like you need to fix who they are. It's more of like helping them deal with the highs and the lows and whatever is hard for them to like live. But there was one little section on there where a dad was talking about his daughter who had later been diagnosed with a mental illness. And when she was little, she'd have those really hard emotions. And he would just tell her to calm down and stop and just like try, you know, as a parent, you want to fix the things that like your kids are struggling with. But then he reflects on it later and he was like, I should have just held her in that moment and just let her feel her emotions, let her just be. And that whole mindset has just kind of like changed my whole perspective on like, sometimes we don't need to fix it. Sometimes we just need to sit there and let it be. And a lot of it is acceptance of like, this is what I'm struggling with in the moment. It's not who I am. It's not what defines me, but it just is. So that's what like came to my mind when you were talking about the fixing parts, because that's a very like westernized view.
100%. I feel like I did somewhat kind of realize that after my brain attacked Marcus and saying he was the like, you know, it almost reminds me of like, you know, like, I don't know, what is it, like almost like a night vision. It's like, and then it's like the red round, Marcus is a problem, go back. Like, you know, and it was totally like that. And then once I got some clarity after the fact, I was just like, okay, so I did have everything I wanted. Marcus wasn't the problem. It's just something that I have to live with and I need to figure out from within. It's not, no matter what I get in my life, finally get on Survivor. I keep applying, Survivor producers. Or I have the biggest house. I finally get a pool. Like there's none of those things are going to help my mental health. I mean, maybe they could like pad it a little bit, but you know, like it's just figuring that out was a big thing for me. Like I said, I'm still really in the thick of figuring crap out, but I have learned a lot along the way. I'd say my like real mental health journey has been, you know, like more around like 3-ish years old, and I'm 28. Like I just didn't start dealing with it till I was later in life. So.
And it really is hard to be in a relationship with someone that has never experienced any mental health. I mean, I'm sure it happens all the time because I mean, I'm in a marriage. Jared's like slowly realizing some of his issues more than he ever has. But before, he was just always a like very even keeled, happy all the time guy. And so when I would be experiencing these strong emotions, or I would be really depressed and not wanting to do anything, or being really anxious and coming out kind of crazy, like he would not know how to handle it at all, and would not know, or he would just say like, calm, like you just need to calm down. And I'm like, calm, if I could calm down, I would love to calm down. That would be great. Please help me with that, because I would love it. Or like, you just need to get motivated and do this. And it's like, wouldn't that be nice if all those little things that people can say to you, wouldn't it be nice if you could just do those things? It's not like I think sometimes people think you're choosing it. You're choosing to just be down, or you're choosing to just feel panicked or worrying about something. But it's definitely not a choice, because I don't think anybody would choose to have the feelings that we have.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely slightly annoying how just Marcus doesn't have to deal with any of the crap that I have to deal with. And I like give him like little
No, I know, for
and
sure.
stuff of like, oh yeah, because you're perfect. But anyways, this is what I'm doing. So it's just like maybe even harder for him to understand. Like I think he's always had a little bit of social anxiety, but like he's really kind of gotten over that as he's just matured and like, you know, done his own thing. But truly, he doesn't experience any of those things. And it's just hard for me to even, sometimes it can be hard to relate. It's like hard to even fathom what that would be like. I just like get jealous sometimes.
Just recently, when Jared and I have gone through a really hard time, we've kind of been able to dig into both of our emotions of why we do what we do and what he's experiencing. And he's kind of realizing, okay, when I act this way, it's actually not just who I am. Like, this is a form of anxiety. It just is different than what your anxiety looks like. So you don't recognize it as that. And I didn't know that that's what it was. Because he started to see a counselor, and he's learned a lot about himself, when before I think he would say he had no mental illness challenges at all. And I think now it would be a different conversation just by going to see a counselor, because something drastic happened in his life. And he's like, why did I do that? Like, that's not what I wanted to do. Why did I do that? And from there, he's learned a lot about himself. So, and I actually will say, I recommend therapy for even people that are not necessarily experiencing something deep and dark. Like, it's so good to learn about yourself, and so good to, like, especially for your relationships, like dating or like what you want. Once you learn more about yourself, you're able to have healthier relationships and like know your worth. Like you were saying, Sophia, knowing your worth is very, very important. So
yeah, and especially with therapy, like I always tell myself, like, the first time I went to therapy, I was like, it was kind of like survivor mode. And so I always told myself that like the next therapist that I would have, it would never be in that like heightened survivor. Like I was always like, I'm going to get to seeing someone before it gets to that level of like, oh, I absolutely need to see someone to kind of save my life kind of thing. And I agree. I think that like therapy is great. For like, sometimes it's not for everyone, but I think that like, I would definitely recommend to just try it for anyone. And obviously, you know, like finding the right person is super important. Like
I'm
Kayla
definitely
said.
gonna revisit it. I think I just need to take a little bit more time to myself to even figure out where I'm at.
Well, and it's really intimidating in a lot of ways too, especially like first time you go, because I have seen like 4 different therapists in my life, and until this most recent one, I don't think I got very much from it. So like you were saying, like it's important to make sure that just because you go to one and you're like, this is not like, this person is telling me stuff I do not agree with, or like whatever it might be, try someone else, because you never know.
Yeah, no, I've already, even just from listening to you, if Alex has some time, like maybe that would,
I think,
be something I look into, because maybe having, I think a lot of my issues are kind of family related. No offense, family.
And that's
no, it's really,
that's, I mean, that's in this, when you said that, my social worker brain was going, because like a lot of it's called like family systems. Like it's not just one individual within the family, it's the whole system itself. And like a lot of the things that happen with kids when they're little is like the more like shit that kids face as, you know, within the family, or like things that affect the family, whether it's, you know, like poverty and all of that, that creates a higher risk to developing mental health issues as you're older. There's like a lot of mental health like illnesses that develop because of childhood trauma and family. And so like it's super important to look at the family, because that's like where everything starts.
Yeah, and it's hard.
And
so you go ahead, Amy.
I think that because you keep up, and I do this too, we keep kind of like apologizing to our family, like, we're not saying you're bad, we're not saying you're bad. And I think we all just need to accept that like in our families, people make mistakes a lot, or like it doesn't have to be their fault. They affected you, and that has created an issue, but it doesn't mean that we're blaming them. It's just, it is what it is. The way that we grew up affects us, and we need to be okay with being able to talk about that and say that too, without anybody feeling like, oh, now I'm getting blamed for the problem.
Mental health stereotypes. And I feel like there's a lot, especially like even just, I don't know if you like notice watching like TV shows or movies that were like, you know, came out when we were younger or before us, of just like, you know, oh, that person's crazy, or that person is, you know, there's just lots of stereotypes that come with mental health, you know, like it's one person's entire storyline and that's who they are. They're the mental health crazy person. So we're going to make them this way and wear all black. So talk to me. What do you have any specific like mental health stereotypes that drives you up the wall? Or actually, in her notes, I sent her Sophia an email, and what is the wording I use? What mental health stereotypes grinds your gears? And like last night, she's like, "What does that mean?" I was like, "Oh, that's my old person Kayla way of saying what bugs you."
I had a feeling, but I was like, I wanted to make sure I'm getting it right.
No, like podcast lingo.
Yeah.
Mental health stereotype. Amy, do you got anything?
My thought was the fact that depression, people just think that just means sad, and anxiety just means worrying. So like, just kind of like such a basic level that it just kind of almost invalidates your feelings.
Like you use it as like an emotion instead of an actual like.
Yeah. Because it's way more than just being sad or just worrying about something. Because I think a lot of people experience sad. I mean, actually, I looked it up. Did you know that 10%? Hold on, actually, I'm going to look. Because I wrote it down.
Do it. Give us the stats.
10%.
Cupcake.
10% of the world's population suffers from anxiety and depression. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and that's probably the only people who have actually gone to get help. I'm
True.
assuming
That's
for
like
them to have that statistic, right?
Mhm. And I think
Yeah.
it said like only 1 in 3 people seek help.
So
or
it's
something like that.
30%.
Yeah.
If you do the math that way. I mean, that's not official, but that's what we'll say.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, it's a lot more common than you think. And, you know, sometimes you can feel kind of alone in it, but like having conversations like these, I think will help that. And, you know, I know it's helped me, like either listening to a podcast or a TV show or just like a social media person who I look up to say something I know can help me.
Yeah, especially when it's people that especially on social media when their lives look like it's perfect and you're just like, oh, I wish I had their life. They have everything I could ever want. But then they're still experiencing mental health issues as well. And it's really good to just like normalize it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree.
Do you have a stereotype, Sophia, that grinds your gears?
I think I like slightly mentioned it earlier, but I think the like language we use around mental health is like can be damaging. Like I hate using the word like crazy to describe like another person.
Sorry, can I use it describing my own self?
But I was gonna say, like, when you're describing your own self, like you said, like it's what you cope with too.
Okay.
Like you have to bring comedy to it sometimes just to like help you deal with it. Because sometimes if you're just always constantly thinking of it in the negative, like it really sucks. But if you can bring some light to it as well, like I think that's totally fine. But I think when we're using it in the context of calling others crazy, or like if they're like acting like a psycho or any language like that, I think kind of perpetuates the damage of like mental health, and like that person isn't crazy, they're just struggling with something internally. And so I think, and I mean, I catch myself doing it every once in a while, so I try to have to rewire my brain to
Totally.
do that.
With so much,
But, yeah.
I feel like just with everything in the world, it's just like rewiring your brain to think a certain different way, I think is like something I'm like tackling right now. And it's definitely a lot. What was I going to say? Oh, mine was kind of silly, but it kind of represents kind of like a bigger kind of thing of kind of what actually even Amy said. I wrote down someone who is depressed wears a black trench coat. Like, I don't know. I'm very bubbly. I'm very easygoing. I smile. I laugh a lot. Someone knows me on a day-to-day basis. They would almost like, I don't know. I've gotten things like that, maybe even not believing me that I have that just because of how I present myself to the world. And just because I don't go to work every day with really like a lot of black eyeliner and a trench coat. I do have purple hair, so that kind of perpetuates it into there. But you know what I mean? Just like having, you know, okay, this on a script and someone's like doing costume fitting for a movie. It's like, oh, they're depressed. Okay, let me get the black trench coat out and like you know, it's just like people like me who wears colorful clothes and is weird and funny and like you know, people definitely don't look at me and being like, she's probably depressed, you know? And I think that's the people that you have to watch out for, like the people who just are always smiling, because I feel like just more like people don't worry about them.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You know, like, because that's just how I present myself to world and how I'm sure a lot of other people do. And so I think it's like, and not dangerous is kind of an intense word, but just it's dangerous to really pigeonhole to, oh, those are the signs. If that person's wearing black or is listening to Avril Lavigne or emo, I don't know, Avril Lavigne's probably like really poppy girly emo, but like, what's the kind where you just scream metal, like listen to metal and all that stuff? Depression alert, you know, instead of me with my June shine and
let's think of it on the other end. People that express their style through dark clothing and dark eyeliner does not mean that they're depressed
exactly.
too.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the happiest people in the world, you know? So it's just like
Style
definitely
does not define emotion.
it does not. So those trench coat people out there,
Rock it.
rock it. So that's what I put. Anyone has anything kind of closing?
I think one quote that I wanted to share that I thought was pretty powerful around like mental health, which is a quote by Glennon Doyle, which is my all-time hero. Love that woman. I don't know if either of you two are familiar with her.
She wrote a book, right?
Yeah, she wrote
The name rings a bell.
Untamed, and then she has her own podcast called We Can Do Hard Things, which would recommend to anyone. It's like stellar podcast. But I have like a notes section in my phone called the Weekly Love from Glennon, and I write down quotes from her like every week. And
That's amazing.
One of them that really stood out to me was, nobody enjoys the sun more than someone who is in the rain for a really long time. And I think that really like encapsulates what we were talking about earlier of like when you're dealing with something really challenging, when you're in the rain and not knowing like if you're going to get to that sun, that moment you do get to the sun is just like such a powerful moment. And so that was like one of the quotes that I was like, I have to share.
I love that.
I love it.
No, you're after this, you have to give me like a list, or maybe I'll even post a list of all the mental health podcasts you listen to, because I listen to zero. I listen to like comedy and like Bachelor recap stuff. So maybe I need to
expand your horizon.
My podcast horizon.
So we hope in this episode you learned a little bit more about us and what we've experienced in our lives. And we're really excited to share more. In our next episode, we'll be talking more about how it affects relationships and relationship advice within mental health as well.
Yes. And so if you are wanting to share your experience, I mean, just talking to us, like our email is always open. stopwearingmyclothespodcast@gmail.com. We don't have to talk about it on the podcast or anything like that. But if you just have any additional questions for us or just need someone to talk to, we are there. And yes. And so if you like this episode, which we hope you did, and we hope you took a little something from it, you could rate us and review on Apple Podcasts. And we're also on YouTube if you prefer to watch it as a video versus audio. If you could like, comment, and subscribe.
Yes, and also always be sure to be checking out our Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Reddit, all those social media sites. We love to share with you and read your comments.
And we drop some extra content.
Yes.
Awesome. So we will see you with Sophia next Monday. Thanks.